Mark Calloway had seen plenty of injustice in his time as a judge, but he never expected to be its target in his own home. One evening, he came home to find a bright red eviction notice slapped onto his front door. Violation of HOA rules, vacate immediately. But there was just one problem. Mark had never been part of an HOA. Before he could even process the absurdity of it, two men in dark uniforms stepped onto his porch, flashing fake badges. "Sir, you're in violation. You need to leave," the taller one said, voice dripping with fake authority. Mark studied them, utility belts, handcuffs, radios, and holsters that didn't sit quite right. These men were playing a dangerous game, thinking they could scare a retired judge into submission. They had no idea who they were dealing with. Because Mark Calloway wasn't just another homeowner. He was a man who had spent decades taking down fraudsters like them. And by the time they realized their mistake, it was already too late. I never expected to come home and find a bright red eviction notice slapped onto my front door like a final verdict. Violation of HOA rules, vacate immediately. I read it twice, then a third time, just to be sure my eyes weren't playing tricks on me. HOA rules? That was funny, because I never joined a homeowners association. My name is Mark Calloway, and I spent 30 years as a judge in Texas, specializing in property disputes, fraudulent land claims, and corporate scams. I've seen every dirty trick in the book, but this was bold. I moved here for peace and quiet, a retirement free from courtrooms and crooks. My house, paid in full, no liens, no HOA, no nonsense. And yet, here I was, holding a notice that had no legal weight, but reeked of intimidation. Then, a knock at the door. I opened it to find two men standing on my porch, dressed like budget cops in navy blue uniforms. Their badges read HOA Enforcement, and their belts were stacked with radios, handcuffs, and even holsters, as if that made them official. The taller one, a slick-looking guy with a clipboard, gave me a smug smile. "Sir, you're in violation of multiple HOA regulations. We're here to escort you off the premises." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh? And on whose authority?" "The HOA board," he said, voice full of false confidence. I let out a short laugh. "Nice try. There is no HOA here. And even if there was, you don't have the power to evict a homeowner." The shorter, bulkier guy took a step forward, his stance shifting as if to intimidate me. "Sir, this isn't a debate. Either comply, or we will remove you." That's when I noticed it, his hand hovering near his belt. A real officer? Wouldn't need to posture, wouldn't have a cheap fake badge, wouldn't be sweating bullets in 70-degree weather. I smiled. "Tell you what, I'll step inside, grab my phone, and call my attorney. Let's see how this plays out." I shut the door and dialed 911. Outside, I heard the tall one mutter, "This old man is going to be a problem." Oh, buddy, you have no idea. The so-called HOA enforcers were still standing on my porch, arms crossed, trying to look tough. But I could see it now. The way their eyes flicked toward each other, the shifting weight from foot to foot. They were nervous. They weren't expecting a fight. Then, red and blue lights flashed across my driveway, the unmistakable hum of a police cruiser rolling to a stop. Finally. I stepped outside as Deputy Carter climbed out of her car, adjusting her duty belt. She had that calm, confident energy you only see in real cops. The kind that don't need to puff up their chests to assert authority. One look at these guys, and I could tell she already had questions. She walked up, scanning the scene with sharp eyes. "What's going on here?" I handed her the eviction notice, making sure my voice was steady. "These men claim to have the authority to remove me from my legally owned home. They also impersonated law enforcement." Her eyebrows knit together as she read the letter. A slow breath left her nose, like she was already tired of the nonsense she was about to deal with. "Sir, Are you part of an HOA? I shook my head. Nope. Never signed anything, never agreed to anything. And even if I had, HOAs don't have legal eviction powers. Deputy Carter turned to the two men. Her voice was still even, but I could hear the edge of suspicion creeping in. Who exactly do you work for? The taller one hesitated, just for a split second, but it was enough. That pause? That was guilt. We're, HOA compliance officers, ma'am. Deputy Carter narrowed her eyes. Compliance officers? She took in their matching uniforms, the cheap badges pinned to their chests, the phony authority dripping off of them like bad cologne. Then her gaze dropped to their utility belts, handcuffs, radios, holsters. Her jaw tightened. And yet you're wearing badges and carrying gear? Who issued this? The shorter guy, who, up until now, had been standing with his arms crossed, trying to look menacing, muttered under his breath, Standard issue. I snorted. Couldn't help it. Issued by whom? Party City? Deputy Carter wasn't amused. IDs. Now. And that's when it happened. The men froze. They looked at each other, then back at the officer. Neither moved. Neither reached for a wallet. And that told me everything I needed to know. They had nothing. Deputy Carter took a step forward. Step over here. Her tone had changed. Now it was the voice of someone who wasn't asking. She motioned toward her patrol car. Hands where I can see them. The two hesitated, but Carter was already reaching for her radio. That was enough to make them comply. As she searched their belts, I watched her expression shift from suspicion to full-blown disbelief. First, she pulled out a set of plastic handcuffs, then a cheap fake radio with no real transmission capabilities, and then the kicker. A black-painted airsoft pistol. It looked real at a glance, but I could spot the tiny orange ring inside the barrel. They were carrying toys. I shook my head. Unbelievable. Deputy Carter held it up, then slowly turned back to face them. Are you kidding me? The taller one opened his mouth like he was about to say something, but he shut it just as fast. Carter sighed, pressing the button on her radio. Dispatch. I need backup. Possible criminal impersonation in progress. That was it. Game over. The fake enforcers? They weren't enforcers anymore. They were suspects. And let me tell you, they knew it. With the fake enforcers in cuffs and their airsoft pistols confiscated, I knew I had barely scratched the surface of this scam. Who sent them? Who gave them authority? Because one thing was clear, this wasn't just HOA overreach. This was a criminal enterprise. So I started digging. I made a few calls. The county records office, a real estate attorney, and even a few neighbors. What I found? It was worse than I imagined. There was no HOA when I bought my house. None. The property records confirmed it. But 2 months ago, a group of people, led by a woman named Lisa Whitmore, declared themselves the new HOA board. And once they were in charge, they started sending out fines. Some homeowners got letters demanding $500 for lawn violations. Others got warnings about unapproved exterior paint colors. They issued phony citations and threatened legal action against people who ignored them. They even tried foreclosing on homes. Yes, foreclosing. On houses they had no actual claim over. It was textbook fraud. They were operating like a mob, intimidating homeowners, making up rules, and pocketing money. And Lisa Whitmore? She wasn't just some misguided HOA president. She was running an extortion scheme. So I did the one thing she never expected. I crashed her next HOA meeting. The meeting was held in a small community center down the street. As I walked in, I could feel the weight of every stare in the room. Lisa was sitting at the head of the long table, looking like she ran the place. The moment she saw me, I saw it, the flicker of fear behind her eyes. She tried to cover it up with arrogance, sitting up straighter, tilting her chin just slightly upward. "Mr. Calloway," she said, voice clipped, "you have no business here." I smiled, slow and deliberate. "Oh, but I do." I set my briefcase down on the table, let the silence stretch just long enough to make them uncomfortable. "I had a very interesting conversation with law enforcement today," I said, my voice calm but firm. "Seems your compliance officers? They're facing felony charges for impersonating police." The room went dead silent. Lisa's face drained of color. Her hands, which had been casually folded, now gripped the edge of the table. "Now hold on. This is all a misunderstanding," she started, but I cut her off. "No, this is extortion. And it's over." I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a cease and desist order from my attorney, laying it flat on the table. "Any further attempts to enforce these illegal HOA rules will result in a lawsuit. And given my background," I leaned in slightly, "trust me, you don't want to fight me in court." The reaction was instant. One board member immediately grabbed his things and left. Another kept shaking his head, muttering something under his breath. A woman near the back whispered to her friend, "Lisa?" She was shaking. She knew. She was finished. The fallout was swift and brutal, just like it should have been. Within a week, the phony HOA was officially dissolved. What started as an illegitimate power grab had ended in a complete and total collapse. Their so-called authority had never been real, but now it was officially dead in the water. As for the two fake enforcers who had shown up at my door trying to intimidate me, they weren't laughing anymore. They were both arrested and charged with impersonating law enforcement, a felony in this state. Turns out, I wasn't the only homeowner they had threatened. Several other residents came forward with similar horror stories: fake fines, harassment, even threats of foreclosure. It was a pattern, not a one-time mistake. And Lisa Whitmore? Let's just say she had the worst week of all. After everything I had uncovered, I knew one thing for sure. She wasn't just running a scam. She was running a criminal operation. So I made a few calls to some old friends at the district attorney's office, people I had worked with for years, people who didn't take kindly to fraud, extortion, and illegal evictions. The evidence was damning. Lisa wasn't just slapped with a fraud lawsuit. She was looking at potential criminal charges. Homeowners she had bullied and scammed were lining up to take legal action. The best part? A few days later, I received a letter in the mail. It was from what remained of the so-called HOA board. It was an official apology. They tried to distance themselves from Lisa, claiming they had no idea what she was doing, that they had been misled. They even tried to convince me to join their new legitimate HOA board as a sign of goodwill. I actually laughed out loud. Then I shredded the letter and threw it in the trash where it belonged. I didn't move here to run an HOA. I moved here to get away from them. And that's exactly what I plan to do. Final thought. They thought they could push me around. They thought they could scare me. They thought I was just another homeowner who didn't know his rights. They were dead wrong. Next time an HOA tries to pull a stunt like this, they'd better hope they don't do it to a judge.